John Colo with GrowingYourGreens.com to do another exciting episode for you. In this episode, I'm still in Pahrump, Nevada at the home of the Green Life Produce organic farm here, and I'm at the Soil Life Summit 2024. And in this episode, I'm going to interview one of the many experts here that actually had classes here because you weren't able to hear them. So anyways, let's go over to a nice area of the farm and we're going to hit up an interview where you guys are going to learn lots of good information. Also, be sure to check my link down below for my overview of the Soil Life Summit 2024, where you get to see some of the best vendors and what's going on here in Pahrump, Nevada. So now I have the pleasure of introducing you guys to Danny Gross, who's been working in agriculture as his sole income for the last 7 years, and he's been around the block. He has lots of experience, and I met him here at the event, and I really want to bring his story to you because I thought it was super important that, I didn't realize, and I know many of you guys didn't realize, and it was a big realization that Danny had, working in agriculture as a sole source of his income. So I think to start this off, Danny, we want to talk about what I'll say is that, some methods of agriculture, maybe like KNF and Jadam do a lot of ferments that are, without oxygen, right? To basically, and it creates smells, and it said, these things are great, right? Yeah. And they're used, and you got to make all these inoculants, and you got to make 15 types, or I don't even know how many, this for this, and you're using local inputs, which is great, but what people don't realize is that there's other things going on. So, what's your experience with this personally, and what realization have you come to lately?
Yeah, that's a very controversial topic, I would say. For me, it was really impactful when it came down to material efficiency. So I was going through a workshop and we were talking about the smells that you smell when your compost pile isn't working well, and those smells are like your sulfur or your ammonia, and those smells are essentially your nutrients being lost. And when I was doing these ferments and stuff, you're smelling a lot of these smells, and I thought I was being really sustainable because I wasn't going to a store to buy what I was using to grow my stuff with, and so I thought I was being sustainable. But then when I thought about it and processed it, and these smells are going off, this is my sulfur, this is my nitrogen, this is my phosphorus, I'm losing these to the atmosphere because of the process that I'm doing. It became this really impactful moment of okay, there's a more efficient way to use my materials. If I'm talking about a closed loop system, if I'm losing my nutrients to the atmosphere, then I'm losing money. That's money that I could be saving in fertilizer costs or input costs in general. And so that was a really impactful moment to me, that the process in which we dispose or break down organic material is very important in terms of what we're getting as an end product. When we're talking about an anaerobic process, these things can leave behind sometimes more harmful things than the beneficial side of it, right? And that's not to say that anaerobic processes don't have their place, because they have their place when we talk about landfills or methane processes. Those methane processes, we use them and can collect those gases and use them for natural gases. So it's not that they don't have their place, excuse me. It's just that we need to be aware and wise and intentional when we're using those processes, and we don't want to be off-gassing more than what we should be, which is essentially none. And if we're off-gassing something, we should be trying to collect it and utilize that for something in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, like a biogas digester, man. I visited a really cool farm in Costa Rica that, digests everything, but it's in a container, and they catch the gas, and they basically fuel their burners with it, so they cook their food with all their waste materials, which, is an appropriate use instead of just going into the air and just volatilizing. So, what people would say that hey, but I'm collecting all these local resources, and then even if I'm losing some volatilization into the air, I still got this main resource that I'm digesting for free, and I'm still getting something out the other end. Right. So, what would you say to that?
Well, for me, the biggest thing was I want to reduce my labor, and so there's a lot of these labor inputs that you're making multiple inputs, right? You have to make this input, and you're digesting all these different materials in different methods. Versus nowadays, I just make one compost, right?
So does that one compost fill all the needs of all those different individual ferments you would do previously?
For me, yeah, I would say so. When we look at it under the microscope, there is more benefits to what we would call biologically focused compost than what we see under a microscope in some of the other preparations.
So does that mean if somebody just learned how to properly make this biologic compost that you speak about, they wouldn't have to do all these other preparations, and they'd have to really, just refine and get really good at this one skill set of making high quality compost, which unfortunately is not taught often enough, or all the little components, instead of like trying to make all the different ones.
Yeah, I mean, so that's working with Catalyst Bioamendments. That's like one of our biggest focuses. Our compost is expensive, but we stress education. One of our biggest things is education. That's why we're here at this event. We're hosting workshops, teaching people how to make compost. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me when I was learning about compost was our sensory, like it's a sensory experience. Our senses guide us so well as humans. And when you smell these putrefaction smells, our body's telling us like these smell bad. And it's not in like our bodies have great intuition is what I'll say. They're not telling us that for no reason. That we don't take a whiff of ammonia and go ooh for no reason, that our bodies are telling us that that's not something that we want near ourselves. And I think that says a lot about it for me.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, I smelled your guys' compost, and it smelled neutral to good, like very little smell at all. But to know that there's so much biology, so you want to talk more about the smell and the no or less smell in like anaerobic versus aerobic ferment.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll talk about in terms of like when we're making compost. I use this phrase all the time when we're looking for input materials. If it smells like death or death's cousin, it's probably not something you want to add into your compost pile because it inherently has some anaerobic biology, and that is often where disease, pests, and pathogens are going to be breeding because they don't. There isn't competition for them. That's the easiest way to say it. There isn't competition, and that competition is what consumes those and outcompetes them, right?
So like manure to me does not smell good. So does that mean that everybody uses manure in their compost? So are you saying that like you shouldn't use manure in your compost?
If your manure smells bad, that's something to be noted. Yeah, that's a great point. We do use manure in our compost. It makes up about 15% of our recipe.
So a small percentage.
Yeah, and that's your high nitrogen. So that's the catalyst, so to speak. That's what starts the bacteria binary fission. That's the heating process of the compost. But it really shouldn't smell too bad.
Well, you could have, if you go to the bathroom, sometimes your poop smells neutral and sometimes it smells really bad, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe that has to do with a healthy diet of the
exactly,
horse.
And also their microbiome, and if they're being fed antibiotics and all these other, who knows what other things are being put in their feed and GMO foods and all these things.
Right, and that's a big factor.
And the animal health.
Yeah, that's a big factor to the health of a compost pile and making a good compost pile. Nowadays, almost all of our materials are contaminated, and it's really, really hard to find materials that aren't contaminated. And when we talk about contaminations, that could be anything from dewormers in animal manure, antibiotics like you had mentioned, or even the glyphosates are sprayed on the sides of roads and on our trees,
animals.
Right? And then those trees go through the wood chipper from the local arborist, and they end up on your lot because you got a free chip drop or something like that, and so it's really, really important to be aware and know where your materials are coming from because that contamination can come from anywhere. It could come from hay bales that were sprayed during harvest or many different forms of contamination. So when we're talking about making a biological compost, the contamination factor is huge for us. That biological process wouldn't happen with any of those contaminations being in there.
So do you smell every single ingredient that goes into the compost you make?
Yeah. I always say this, I'll say it 100 times over. Building compost is a sensory experience. So it's hands-on. Not only as it smells, but it's like when we talk about anaerobic smells, that's one thing, but then also in referring to wood chips, you don't want it to smell like pine, right? That's antimicrobial. Or
strong smells. Strong smells are just basically essential oils that are antimicrobial in general.
Right, like cedar and other things like that, eucalyptus, right? Those things are all going to inhibit our process, and we would consider those a contaminant, right? But that's not to say that we don't use pine chips. We use pine chips, but we would age it. Right, and let those. You don't want to smell it.
Volatilize out.
yeah. You don't want to smell it anymore. So that's why I always say it's a sensory experience, because it's hands-on, right? It's all about feels. If it's like super soggy and it doesn't smell, maybe it just got wet yesterday, you know. So it's hands-on. It's sensory. Smell your materials. If they smell like pine or cleaners, then they're probably bacterial cleaners or fungal cleaners, and they might be cleaning out your biology, right?
So what about putting like rotten fruit that may smell a little bit fermented in your compost? Because obviously that's not.
Yeah. So it's not.
That could smell bad to some people.
Yeah, it's not to say that you shouldn't encompass some of these materials. If that's your material that you have around, just don't let it be like too much of your bio.
So dominant.
Know? Yeah. Try to outcompete it with aerobic biology, right? I would say, like, if I had a lot of rotten stuff to deal with, I would probably use a lot of carbon, so a lot of wood chips.
I see.
To deal with that, yeah.
So you mentioned like a good quality manure is 15% of the recipe, but what are the other ingredients that should go into a high quality compost?
Yeah, our compost recipe, we're really open with this. We don't really hide it. It's going to be 60% wood chips. It's going to be about 20 to 25% greens. And these greens and high nitrogens sometimes will shift depending on what we have on hand and what the weather is. But you're looking to have about 15% high nitrogen and 25% nitrogen. And that could be any green materials, green in color, essentially.
Wow, so that's a basic, simple recipe right there.
Yeah.
So now what you're not talking about, Danny, and I know this, is the diversity of the different ingredients of each of those categories. So you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, diversity is it's the number one thing. Diversity. I'll say it again. Diversity. It's the most important thing. So you want diversity in your wood chips if you can get it. You want diversity in your grasses if you can get it. If you can get diversity in your manures, you want that. Being a scale production at the compost lot, we don't have all those benefits. We do our best to get all the diversity that we can, but we are working at scale, so it can be really challenging to get diversity at scale. But when you're lacking diversity, what you do to replace that diversity is use an inoculant, because the purpose of diversity is to pull in microbial life from all over and use that as your inoculant, right? So if you don't have that diversity, what you can do is use an inoculant of sorts. That's where our compost comes in, and you can use it like a sourdough starter and use it as an inoculant to build your compost diversity up, the biological diversity. Ideally, you still have a diversity of inputs, but you still have your fungal food and you have your bacterial food, and there's your good diversity. And then in our compost, you have all the protozoa, the nematodes, the microarthropods, all that stuff to help facilitate those processes.
So now that you're not making the anaerobic ferments, you are making compost, and you look at your compost as your baby. So you want to discuss more of this concept, because most people in gardening or farming is just, it's just my compost pile. I just dump stuff on there, turn it once in a blue moon, and I really pay no attention. And I always get compost. So yeah, it might take half a year or maybe a year if you're just really just fragrantly doing it wrong. but like, you want to discuss this more on how important it is to like literally take care of your compost as it is your pet that you love.
Well, we can't say every compost, right? It's got to be a biological compost that is alive already. It's a living organism. It's like you don't go to the pet store and pick up a goldfish and leave it in the corner of your house. You got to care for it. You got to maintain it. Our compost is a living organism. It's got millions and millions of organisms, so many that we have to count it by volume because it's so hard to count. I would say that it's the most important aspect is that you're caring for it with moisture, and it's a sensory experience, right? So it's digging in there, it's being part of that, making sure the moisture is always on point. For me, I worry about it, because if the weather changes, then I might not be watering for 2 days, or if it doesn't rain and it's really hot and sunny, then I need to water immediately. The moisture is what keeps all this biology alive and active and able to move even throughout the pile. Without biology, or without moisture, biology can't even really move. Most of these things being biology, just need water to move. And so if we're talking about the most important aspect of my job in terms of composting, it's maintaining that moisture for these organisms to survive. When we drop moisture too low, you start seeing a die-off in your nematodes and your protozoa, and those are the nutrient cyclers, right? The bacteria and the fungi are really important. They're like the building blocks. But if you don't have consumption of those, then you don't have nutrient cycling. Yeah.
So what percentage of moisture are we looking for, and at what ranges of moisture are different creatures active, for example?
Yeah, so that's a really, I would say that's a almost impossible thing to describe over a camera. But what I would say is that we say 55% moisture, but it's sensory, and that's why we do workshops. We want to get that out there and show people what that moisture is looking like. When we get samples from people coming to a workshop, most of the times I'm looking at these samples and off the bat I know they're too dry. You should be able to like break wood chips and just it be completely soaked on the inside. And a lot of the times the material that we're looking at that people call compost is very, very dry, and that doesn't do very well in sustaining life. When you grab a wood chip from our compost and you break it, it's completely moist on the inside. You can squeeze it and watch water come out of the wood chip. And that's a big testament of organic matter. My favorite thing, or like random statistic or whatever you want to call it, fun fact, is 1% increase in organic matter in an acre of land increases your water retention 16,000 gallons, and that's on the low side. It could be even higher than that in some cases. So organic matter is the building block of good, healthy soil, and that's where that facilitation of life is in our compost, is in that organic matter and its ability to hold moisture for bacteria, fungi, all those things, you know. To add to that, though, what is the ideal moisture? 55%, right? But we do a squeeze test, and so when we're squeezing our compost, we want to get like a good handful in there, something that fits in your hand nicely, and you want to squeeze it. You want to be able to see water drip down through your fingers, not like
barely.
Yeah, not like pouring, maybe a drop or two, or maybe even it just is a little bit dry and you can just hear it like a sponge. You know, you put it up to your ear and you can hear that. Or it just seeing moisture is a good sign. But a lot of the times we'll grab compost and it'll just be completely dry, and there's no breakdown when the wood chip is dry, right? And the bacteria and the fungi can get in there if it's wet, and it's a habitable place, you know.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's a big problem, is that most people have their compost too dry. You know, it's rare that I see compost like that wet, you know, so
yeah,
this is something you guys should pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, is our compost might be what people would consider wet, but we're still not pushing that line of anaerobic. We're not getting smells, and that's where that sensory experience comes in really important. I'm feeling moisture, I'm going to push how much moisture I can add to it, because moisture facilitates life, water facilitates life, but I don't want it to go anaerobic, right? And so I'm going to continue smelling it, digging through the entirety of the pile, getting all the way into the center of the pile, giving that a whiff, making sure that it's not going anaerobic on the inside or anywhere throughout the pile. So that smell thing is really important to us, even in our compost, and even in terms of a finished compost. If I get too much water on a pile and let it sit there, anaerobic states are really just, that term is really just means low oxygen. It's a fancy term for low oxygen, and we don't survive in low oxygen environments, and not many things that are beneficial to us survive in low oxygen environments.
So talking about moisture, since moisture is so important, is I know, you know, out where you're making the compost, it could be like 100 degrees in the summertime. So I know you cover your compost. You want to discuss this more, because it's not often talked about, where you've got to actually cover your compost, and what are the benefits of that?
Right, that's actually kind of the reason we're here at this Grassroots Fabric Pots conference. Is I called up Tyler one day because I was fed up with the covers that we use on our compost, because we cover all of our windrows, and I was fed up with the covers. So I called up Tyler at Grassroots and I was like, dude, you got to help us with a solution, something better. And so they made us these custom Grassroots covers that are made out of the same material that the fabric pots are made out of, and they cover our entire windrow. 10 feet wide is the fabric width, and then it's 200 feet long, and it's a heck of a thing to pull off of a windrow, I'll tell you that much. But it's worth its weight in gold, is like what they say, that famous quote. It's protecting our piles from UV light, it's protecting them from the wind battering them and just drying them out faster than we would hope. So that's a huge benefit to us. But then also in the rain, when rain hits it allows some rain to get through.
Some to shut off.
Yeah, then a good amount to just shut down the sides, so that allows our piles to kind of avoid that anaerobic state in a heavy rainfall. Because we're down in Nevada City, even just in the last few weeks, we were getting 2 inches of rain a day, and that's quite significant when you're talking about a big open lot, Yeah, it has its impacts.
All right, Danny, so actually after coming from your whole scope of going from, the KNF and whatnot, and now moving to what you're doing now, what differences have you seen in like the end result? So like instead of, from people you've heard from in your personal experience doing ferments and inoculating soil with the different ferments, or adding, your biologically active, very important soil, compost to it, what kind of testimonials have you gotten and have you seen?
I mean, nowadays with Catalyst, we're working at scale, so it's it's beyond expression, is what I would say. For me, it came down to when I shifted what I was doing, it came down to a laziness factor. It came down to an ease of inputs, an efficiency aspect, right? For me, it was, I'm a lazy gardener. I don't want to have to do 100 different things. And it's that simple phrase, as above, so below, right? We're oftentimes distracted by what's going on with the plant and how the plant's looking, and all like these factors of aphids or whatever problems we're having. To me, it came down to as above, so below. Focus on the soil first, the plants will come later. And so with just using good, healthy, biologically active compost, I had my most successful garden, the easiest garden I ever had, and then I started working for Catalyst because I was sold, and I haven't grown since then. But now
you're growing microbes now.
Yeah, and now I'm seeing it happen at scale, and I'm getting to share it with people now, and it's been an incredible journey. And for me, it's that efficiency thing, right? It's like the efficiency of materials, efficiency of my time. I'm lazy. I want to be a lazy gardener. I want to hang out in my garden and see things grow. I don't want to hang out in my garden and work
do
all day.
Stuff. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest factor, and I think that's what sold me on it. It's easy, right? It's like, let's just break it down to the simplistic side of things.
All right, cool. I mean, when you follow nature, right? I mean, nature's always right, they say. So we just got to model nature, right? And not try to do this human thing and do what we think is best, but, just model nature and model the systems in nature, right? And composting ideally and making microbial rich compost can help you do that. So last question for Danny is, what words of wisdom do you want to share with my viewers today after they've watched this entire episode? Like, what should they do to take their garden, take their inputs to create better quality outputs or whatever?
Use your senses. Use your nose, use your hands. If it smells bad, if it looks like you don't want to put your hands in it, use your senses. And explore the soil food web. Understand the predator-prey relationship. You don't have to be an expert on the microscope. I'm not an expert on the microscope. It's that simple theory of, like, if there's wolves, the ecosystem is thriving. So look for the wolves in your soil. Look for the predatory things, the nematodes, the microarthropods, the amoebas, all the protozoa. Look for the wolves, and you'll know that your ecosystem is thriving. So you don't have to be an expert. Get a microscope, start exploring, have fun with it, and make your life easy. Like don't stress yourself on it. You can do static composting. You don't have to do thermophilic composting, but like what we do on our commercial lot. You can do static composting, make sure the smells don't get smelly, make sure it doesn't get hot, and you can break down some great material that way and have a biologically active product to have for yourself.
Cool. And for those of you guys that never heard about, this kind of like food soil web stuff, I'd recommend a really good, beginner level book for you guys to read. It's called Teaming with Microbes, so that'll kind of get your foot in the door to understand more about what we're talking about, because a lot of people, honestly, unfortunately, even in this day, have not heard about the food soil web and how important it is to soil life and to have living soil where people are just dumping amendments and figuring that's going to solve all the solutions. And that's why I came here to the living soil summit here, and I'm making these videos to share with you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you did, hey, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Also be sure to share this with other people so that they can be more aware about some better ways to use your inputs to have a more successful garden, and you can be more lazy than trying to craft all these different crazy ferments that stink up your house. All right. Also be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss my new upcoming episodes. I'm coming here 5 to 7 days. You never know what you'll be learning or where I'll be showing up to teach you guys the latest information about growing beyond organic fruits and vegetables and other plants. Also make sure you click the bell to get notified as my videos come out. And finally, be sure to check past episodes. Past episodes are Wolf of Knowledge. Over 1,700 episodes at this time teach you guys all about how to grow your own food at home. So with that, my name is John Kohler with growingyourgreens.com. We'll see you next time. Until then, remember, keep on growing.